Hi everyone, and welcome to Learn Vim Fast, Essential Skills for Developers. This course is ideal for programmers, whether you're a junior or a senior, for sysadmins and Linux power users, or even if you're just interested in Vim for any other reason. Why learn Vim? Vim has a lot of benefits that other text editors lack. Most importantly, speed and efficiency. Vim has also been around since the 90s and it's only getting more popular. Vim is installed in almost every Linux distribution in some way or another, and once you get used to it, it will become second nature and you will never want to go back. In this course, you will learn how to confidently read and write files from the terminal using Vim. You will learn the Vim essentials and how to start using it on the job. You will learn how to use the "help" command for quick refreshers on Vim commands. You will learn how to edit code in Vim with various commands and key combinations. And finally, you will learn how to configure Vim using a vimrc file. You can follow along using Vim if it's installed on your system. You can type in vi or vim -- version to check which version is installed. So on Ubuntu it's vi -- version, which if we scroll up we can see it's the tiny version right here. But you will want the full version, which you can install using apt-get install vim. Once you do that, let's clear this, you will have Vim, which will be the huge version, which will look like this. But if you want, you can also following along some parts of this course using Vim plugins in your favorite editor. For example, Visual Studio Code, Visual Studio, and the JetBrains editors all have a Vim plugin. Let's get started. What exactly is Vim? Vim is a text editor that runs in the terminal. The name stands for VI Improved and was created by Bram Molenaar, a Dutch guy, in the 90s. It has certain features to build upon the old VI editor, such as code highlighting and extensibility using plugins. What makes Vim special is that it's modal. Certain key presses do different things depending on which mode you're in. We have normal mode for running commands and moving around. We have visual mode for selecting and editing text, and insert mode for inserting text. We also have command mode for running commands like write, quit, and help. An advantage of this modal editing is that you don't have to contort your fingers into difficult key combinations with Ctrl, Shift, Alt, whatever. For example, copying is done with Y instead of Ctrl C, but in insert mode, the Y key will simply put the Y character on screen. We can see this in the editor. If we press I to go into insert mode, we can just type like any other editor. But if we press escape to go back to normal mode, we can move around with J, K, H, and L. We can go back whole words. And in visual mode, we can highlight text, just like you would expect to be able to do with your mouse. Another great thing about Vim is that it runs pretty much anywhere. Most Linux distributions have some version of Vim pre-installed, so even if you only learn the basics, you can use it for most terminals to edit config files really quickly. This makes it perfect for working in terminals via SSH sessions or in containers. In a nutshell, Vim is powerful, minimal, and fast. And once you get used to it, you don't want anything else. Let's go over the different modes in Vim. We have normal mode, which is the default mode you enter once you open Vim. In this mode, we can move around using the arrow keys or HJKL, which is the Vim way. We can execute motions such as moving over whole words, enter any other mode from normal mode, and we can always go back to normal mode by pressing escape. We have insert mode, which we can enter using I or A. This allows us to enter text. If we enter insert mode, notice the insert text at the bottom left corner of the screen. And also please note that TinyVim will not have this text at the bottom left corner. As you can see, we can enter text, so we're in insert mode, but we don't see the text. Now, we have entered some text. We can go back to normal mode by pressing escape, and we can move around using the arrow keys or HJKL, which is left, down, up, and right. We also have visual mode, which we enter by pressing V. Again, notice the text at the bottom left corner. Now we can just select text on which we can do some certain operations, such as deleting. And finally, we have command mode, which we enter using a colon. You will see that the cursor jumps at the bottom left corner. We can type something here. It will let us type in commands that you see at the bottom left corner. For example, quitting Vim. You can quit with :quit, but also with :q. But it gives an error, since we didn't write since the last change, since this is a new file. So we can just do Q, ! to quit without saving. These are the basics of Vim. There are some more modes that we won't discuss, such as a visual block or select mode. And in our next lecture, we will talk about opening and saving files. In this lecture, we'll talk about opening and closing files using Vim. We can open Vim with a new file by just typing Vim. Let's close it, and let's open a new file using Vim. Or we can open Vim by typing Vim followed by a file name, like something.txt. Let me show you. This directory is empty. So something.txt. Let's enter some text. If we want to write it, we can do that in command mode using :W. If you also want to quit immediately after, we can write :WQ. And because we want to save the file, we won't force quit it. So WQ. And now you can see we have something.txt, which is what we typed. If we run this command again, it will open the existing file. But we can also open the file from within Vim. This is useful if you want to open multiple files, which we will talk about a lot later on in the course. We just go into command mode, type :E, followed by the file name, which will open the existing file. This is pretty much everything that you need to know for your first hour in Vim. I'll see you in the next one. Next, let's show how to move around in a file. Let me open a Rust file. Don't mind the bad code. As we've discussed before, we can move around in normal mode using the arrow keys or H, J, K, and L, which just looks like this. If we press and hold it, it will just continue to go down, up, left, or right, like you would expect. But we can also add some numbers to the mix. We can say 5J, and it will move us. It will move the cursor 5 lines below, or 5K. It will move 5 up. 20K. It will move 20 lines up, so on and so forth. There are also certain keybinds that will go to predetermined destinations, such as the end of a line with $sign, so shift 4, the beginning of a line with 0, or the first non-white space character with a caret, so that's shift 6. So we have 0, caret, $sign. We can go to the beginning of a file with GG and the end of a file with capital G, so shift G. We can also move up or down half a page using Control U and Control D. And there are some more that we will tackle later on in the course as well, or that you will learn about yourself. These are the ones I use most days. So, open your favorite text file, play around with this for a bit, get used to it, and we'll see you in the next course. Next lecture. To move around more efficiently, we can utilize certain useful features, such as relative numbers. Let's turn these on by typing set relative number in command mode. As you can see, we now have line numbers, but they don't quite make sense. They start at 20 at the top, and down below it's 4. Well, that's because they're relative to your current cursor position. This is very useful when using Vim motions, because if we want to go to our defer statement at the top, that's 10 lines above, we can now see easily. So we can do 10k, and we're at the line. If we want to go to the app result variable, we can just say 12j. But one thing that's a bit annoying is our current cursor position shows a 0. If we set number together with relative number, we can now see that our current cursor position shows 28, or the regular line number. If you only want absolute numbers, you can do that as well. Then we just have to set no relative number. And now you can see it just works like any other editor. If you want to go to a line number directly, you can type in colon and then the line number, for example, the defer statement at line 18, and press enter. Lastly, we can center Vim around the cursor by using lowercase zz. This is pretty useful, especially at the end of a file. It's a bit annoying to always type at the bottom, so I most times just use zz, so it's a bit more centered. These are just some of the tips that are available for navigating in Vim, but you'll quickly learn your own favorite ways. In the next lecture, we will tackle editing files using Vim motions. Let's get into the basics of file editing with Vim. We can do basic simple editing in insert mode. We can type something, and we can delete things with backspace. So it works just like a regular text editor. But we want to use the power of Vim. Pressing A will put us in insert mode after the cursor, and I will put us into insert mode at the cursor. So if we have a.aaa and we go to the dot, if we press I, we will go before the dot, and if we press A, we will go after the dot. Next, let's go into visual mode and check some common motions. For example, V will put us into visual mode. If we press lowercase e, we will go to the end of a word. If we press E again, we will go to the end of the next word, and so on. We can also type lowercase b to go to the beginning of a word, backwards. So we can use EB to move within a word. We can use lowercase w to go to the next word. But this will stop at symbols. For example, right here. If we press E, it will stop us at the end of the word. If we press E again, it will put us on the dot. And if we press E again, it will put us at the end of the next word. But we can also move around the whole word that is not separated with a white space with uppercase E or uppercase B or uppercase W to go to the next word which isn't separated with white space. So W, 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 W. We can also move around multiple words, sentences, whatever, with a count, just like we did 5K and 5J. We can also say, let's go into visual mode to see it. We can also say 5W to go 5 words forward. Now that we know these motions, we want to do some common operations on them. For example, we can delete text with lowercase d. We can delete a single character with X. We can also incorporate this with our motions. So we can say DW to delete a word. We can also highlight some text and then delete it with D. Or we can delete whole lines with DD. So DD will delete a whole line. We also have C, cut, which will delete whatever we say and enter us into insert mode. So for example, we have DD, which will keep us in normal mode, and we have CC, which will put us into insert mode. This is very useful if you just need to change some text. For example, we have something here, but it should be someone. Then you can just say CE. You can type whatever you need, press escape, and go back into normal mode. Finally, we have copy and pasting, which in Vim is a bit weird. By default, it doesn't use the system clipboard, so be aware of that. We can highlight some text, we can yank it into a register. This will copy it, essentially. And then we can put it or paste it with P. Again, we can also copy a whole line with YY and then just paste it with P. I could do a whole lecture on copying and pasting in Vim because it's pretty difficult. We have a ton of registers that it uses, but that's something more for a advanced Vim course, so we will not get into it. There are a ton of new commands here. Try them out yourself. You might not use every one daily. I often forget the usage of the uppercase motions. But if you try it enough times, you will get more comfortable. You will find the nuances and you will use every one of these eventually. I'll see you in the next lecture. Searching and replacing in Vim is powerful. To search in Vim, we don't use Ctrl F, we use a / followed by our search term. For example, if we type / foo, you can see that it will highlight the first occurrence of foo. In the bottom left corner, you will also see the search term. If you press enter, we will go to the first occurrence, and we can go to the next occurrence by typing lowercase n, or we can go back with capital N. We could also search backwards with a question mark. So question mark foo. We'll again highlight this occurrence of foo because we were here. So the first backwards occurrence is over here. We can also ignore uppercase and lowercase with a \c flag. So we say /foo \c, which will still highlight the next occurrence. So let's go here, do the same. As you can see, foo \c will highlight foo even if it has a capital O and F. If we remove the flag, it will go to the next occurrence, which will be an exact copy. Searching and replacing in Vim is very powerful, and it's pretty similar to Ctrl F in most editors. We need to highlight some text. I use Shift V to go into visual line, which will select the whole line. We'll type :S. Ignore the weird characters at the bottom, just focus on the :S. Then we will type our search term with a slash, of course, sorry, and with the term which we want to replace it with. So if we want to turn foo into bar, we can just do that, press enter, and it will change. If we have multiple occurrences that we all want to change in our highlighted area, we say :S/, let's turn foo, the exact foo, so not the first one, into buzz, and we type /G, which will make it a global search and replace. And as you can see, the two foos are now buzz. We could also ask Vim to ask us for confirmation. For example, you have a whole file, want to replace some variables, and want to check if you need to replace it. We can do foo buzz G to make it global again, so it will not stop at the first occurrence. And we can add C to that as well. If we press enter, it will ask us replace B ... with a bunch of characters which you can use to answer. So do we want to replace this with buzz? We press Y. For the next one, Y as well. You also have A, which will go all the way, and the others we will not get into right now. If we want to search a whole file and replace it, instead of highlighting the whole file with GG, capital V, capital G, just a nice tip, we can just say :% or as %, foo bar. I was wrong again. It's %s, sorry. Foo bar. And then we can say G to replace everything in the file. So we have a ton of bars right now. Let's change bar into buzz. Everything changed. This is basic search and replacing. You can also get into regular expressions when searching and replacing if you want, but that's really out of scope for this course because that can take hours to master. I'll see you in the next lecture. Using the help command effectively is an amazing thing for Vim users. Unfortunately, the VS Code Vim plugin doesn't support it, but of course we can check it out in our own Vim in the terminal. You can open the help pages with :help, so command mode help, or just H. As you can see, it opens another window, a split screen, with the help file. It also provides some interesting information already, such as moving around and how to use the help pages. Here you can see the HJKL, how to close Vim, jumping to subjects, which we'll go into next. We can also open the help with a search term, so help buffers, which will move us to the buffers page of the help pages. If we move down here, right at the end here, you see these, in my case, blue links, which we can follow with control followed by a closing square bracket. Above here we can see there's another link which we might want to follow. We can do the same. And if we want to go back to the page where we jumped from, we can do Control O. If we want to go back one step further, we can do Control O again. Since the help page is a split screen, a new window, we can move around using some window navigation with Control W and then H, J, K, or L. In this case, J to move down. We can see that we move into our window below. We can do Control W, K to go back up. Now you can see we're back in the help pages. We can equalize the two splits by using Control W equal sign. We can maximize our currently active window with Control W underscore, which you can see our small file is, well, it's really small. It's minimized. And we can, of course, close a window with :Q. If you ever want to open your own split screens, you can use vsplit for a vertical split, which will split the currently open buffer or currently open file into a page on a window on the right. We can close it with :Q. You can also use split to do the same, but horizontally. This concludes the lecture on the help pages and some bonus on multi-window workflows as well. See you in the next one. Another great feature of Vim is its extensibility. We can persist changes such as our set relative number in a vimrc file. On Linux, this file is in the home directory, so we just cd into a tilde. And we can create a Vim configuration file with vim.vimrc. A good thing to know before we start configuring is that if you ever get any errors or unexpected results from your configuration file, you can run Vim without its vimrc by using the -- clean flag. So let's go ahead and start a vimrc file. Let's create it. Let's add a comment for relative numbers. And then we say set relative number. It's the same as in the command mode, and set number. If we write this, you can see nothing changed, but if we open Vim again, you can see we now have our absolute and relative line numbers. We can also do some things for tabs, such as set expand tab. So our tabs, instead of a single tab character, is going to be a few space characters. We can also set our tab stop, so the amount of spaces we're going to use. We can also set our shift width, which is the amount that a tab character will shift. And we can set smart indent for some better indentation when copying, pasting, and working with files. If we write this and we go back, we can see a single tab will have just 4 spaces. Finally, let's quickly discuss remapping keys. One tweak that I always add is a remapping of the window navigation commands that we have seen in the last lecture. So let's say split nav, and then we say NNO remap, the command that we want to use. So Control H will be remapped from Control WH. Now we can change H to J. The same with K. And the same with L. So now instead of moving around with Control W, H, J, K, L, we can just use Control H, J, K, and L. Let's try this out. Let's open help and equalize the splits so we can see it better. I have my cursor right in the top run, and with just Control J, K, I can move up and down. This just saves a lot of like memory in your brain because it's easier to remember, it's easier to execute, especially when you're working with a lot of tabs or windows. We can also rebind commands that we would normally execute in command mode. One key combination we can use is a remap of we will use our leader key H. The leader key is a key often used for your own configurations. It defaults to a backslash, and this will open help user manual, which is a great source for you to read anyway, and then a carriage return, which will execute our command. If we go back and we do \h, it will open our user manual. How handy. A lot of Vim configurations, such as lazy Vim, often use the space key for a map leader. So at the top of our vimrc file, we can say let leader, map leader, is just a space, and then we can say space H to open our user manual. You probably don't want that, but it's good to know that it's available. So in short, a very basic Vim configuration would look something like this. We have some better navigation, we fixed our tabs, and we have our line numbers. I will continue to use this for the rest of the course. Vimdiff is an awesome tool that lets us compare and merge two files with the power of Vim. We open Vimdiff with the vim-d command, or with the vimdiff command followed by the two files we want to compare. I have two files right here, file 1 and file 2. These are very similar but have some small changes, like some other text, another line of text which file 2 doesn't have, just so you can see how Vimdiff will work with these changes. Let's open them. As you can see, the changes are color coded. Blue lines are identical, red lines are removed, green lines are new lines, and yellow lines are edited lines. This depends on your theme, because you can see mine really messes these up. So we can change the color theme with the color scheme command. You can just use tab to go through them. I know that Elflord has some nice contrast, which makes it a bit easier to read. But still, you can see the colors are a bit weird. We have the blue lines, we have gray for changes instead of yellow, and we have purple instead of red for a removed line. Of course, you can also persist your color theme change in a vimrc file. To navigate within Vimdiff, we use the square brackets and C. So closing square bracket will go to the next change, and opening square bracket will go to the previous change. Let's go to the next change a few times. Let's go back. As you can see, now we're on line 1. If we go to the next change, we're on line 4, on which file 2 has some more changes. And the other div is, of course, the extra line of text that file 1 has. We can go back as well. We can also move between the windows. We can use Ctrl W W to toggle between them. But we can also use our Ctrl W, L, and H. And because we have made the changes in our vimrc file, we can just do Ctrl L and H instead of Ctrl W, L, and H. To accept changes, you can use DP or DO. These two are the opposites of another. DP will put changes from the opposite window into the current window, and DO will put changes from our current window into the other window. I thought of a way to make this more clear. It's pretty difficult. ChatGPT makes it difficult to understand, so you kinda just have to try it. When we're on this first change and we do DP, you can see that the change from the first file goes to the second file. If we want to undo this change with U, we have to go to the second file and press U. If we do DO, you can see that we now have second here. And we can undo the change just from the first file as well. So DO will pull the changes and DP will put the changes. You really should play around with this a little bit. It's much easier to understand that way, and it gets pretty comfortable. So, in summary, DP will put changes into the other window, DO will pull changes, and you can move around in these files with square bracket C and square bracket opening C to go to the previous change. We've gone through all the lectures. If you've made it this far, congratulations. You've learned practically everything that you should learn for your Vim fundamentals. The next step is to put it into practice. I've created a project.md file, which you can download from this lecture, and you can work through the exercises by yourself. Try and keep it within Vim. Don't use the internet, just use the help command if you ever get stuck. In the next lecture, we're going to go through the exercises together, and I will show you how I would have done this. There are multiple ways to achieve these exercises, so if you've done it in any other way, it's still fine. So, let's try and tackle this project together. If you've already done it, congratulations, I'm proud of you. You could skip this lecture, but you could also still keep watching to know how I would have done it and if I would have done anything different. Welcome to the practice project. This file contains some exercises. Try completing them without external help. Just use the help command if you get stuck and rely on what you've learned in the lectures. So let's get started. Changing the color scheme. We've seen in the last lecture is the colon color scheme command in command mode. Oh, sorry about that. Let's just go back to the default. So it's color scheme, and then you can just find something that you like. Enter insert mode. We can do this with lowercase o to open a new line below our cursor. We can just use a lowercase I to go into insert mode at our cursor. We can go and use lowercase a to go into insert mode after our cursor, and capital O to go a line above. We didn't touch all of those, but they are there, and I use O pretty often myself. Save and quit, of course, is with colon right or colon W or colon WQ to quit as well. We can also quit without saving changes. If we have any changes and we try to quit, we get an error. But if we want to discard those changes, we can use a exclamation mark. Editing basics. Let's delete a word. We can do this with DW to delete the word under the cursor, or at least until the next word. We can use a capital W to also delete non-whitespace characters. So capital W will delete the point, while DW will not. We can undo and redo changes with lowercase u and control lowercase r, of course. We've seen this all before, and I've done it through this lecture as well. We can delete an entire line of text in a few ways. We could highlight the whole line with visual line mode, which is capital V, and then press D to delete it. But we could also just press lowercase dd, which will delete the line in normal mode, which is probably what I would have done in this case. Join two lines. Have we touched this in the course is the question. So if we do help join, we can see that the join command joins a few lines, and it's the same as uppercase J. So let's just go into the help page of capital J. Join count lines. Okay, so this looks like what we need, right? So capital J a few times, and then we have our one smooth sentence. We can also do the command join, but capital J is how I do it often. Yank and paste. If we want to yank a single word, we can highlight it and press the Y key. We can paste it or put it with the P key. If we want to yank a whole line, we can do YY and paste it. So there are some ways to do this. You could also select the whole line, yank it and put it. So yeah, whatever you did there, it's probably fine. Let's move to the beginning and end of a line. Let's go up here and add a tab with a more than sign. So shift ... So this to see how we move through a line with whitespace. Of course, to go to the end of a line, we have the $sign, so shift 4 on my keyboard. We can go to the first character of a line with 0, or we can go to the first non-whitespace character with a caret or a roof, like whatever you want to call it. So that's how we move on a line to the beginning, the end, and the first non-whitespace character. I don't really use 0. I only use the caret because I don't want to go to the first whitespace line. It doesn't really make sense in most cases. We can go through a sentence using the word and uppercase word motions. So lowercase w, we can see that with word based, it moves through it pretty slow. But if we use a capital W, it would just go over the whole word. It's the same with capital B. And it is the same with punctuation. So lowercase W and B will go to the point, but uppercase will just go to the next word. Search within a file. We've done this with a / and then our search term. Well, let's search for search. And as we can see, when we hit lowercase n to go to the next occurrence, there's only one occurrence of search with lowercase, because of course in the titles we've seen it before. So let's use the search \c to ignore the casings, and then we see there are 3 occurrences. You could also use a question mark to go backwards, but you probably won't use it that often. Find a character on a line. We haven't really touched this, so I've put a help lowercase f in here. Lowercase f will go to the count occurrence of a character to the right. Uppercase will go to the left. Okay. So if we do f and then lowercase r, we should go to the end of the word cursor. The middle. I'm an idiot, but yeah, the middle. So if we do f r again, we go to the next one, the next occurrence. If we do it again, we should go to the r in character. And if we do uppercase r, we can go back to cursor again. Power features. Let's go into visual mode and visual line mode to select and edit content. We've already done this before with the copying and with the deleting. So we can go into regular visual mode with lowercase v, delete some text. We can go into visual line mode with uppercase v and delete a whole line or select some more lines. And if you really want, you might have tried it already, we can go into visual block mode, which you probably won't use very often, at least I don't, with control lowercase v, and this will select a block, a square, which you can work on. Next up we have relative line numbers. We have set them already, so with no relative number we can disable them, and then we can enable them with relative number. Pretty easy stuff. Of course we can persist these changes in our vimrc file. We can replace a single word with another. There are multiple ways to do this again. I often just use C and an E to go to the end of the word instead of the next word, just so I have a space character when I go back into normal mode. But you could also use W, C, which will then also delete the first one, the first character of the next word. So I just use E to go and select a word. You can play around with this a bit. You could also use capital E to also delete any white space or symbols, such as a comment, a comma, which is pretty useful when working with function parameters. For example, we have I don't know, like index object and something else, like I don't know, wine. Don't know why. So if we do DW, we still get the comma, but if we want to remove the whole parameter, we are better off just using a capital E to also remove the comma. Or you would probably use a capital W to go to the next word. So if we go back, the W, capital W, we just keep the wine. Cool. Buffers, windows, and more. We can open multiple files and switch between them. We have done this with our vsplit. Let's open, I think I have file2.txt here as well. We can move between them with Control W, H, J, K, and L, depending on where the split screen is. If we want, we could also open another split with file 1, and then we can go between those files as well. And then we can quit them with :q. But we still have the buffers open, and we can go through those buffers with buff bn, which will go to the next, which should go to the next bp. We probably have to write, yeah. So bp will go to the previous buffer, bn will go to the next buffer. You can find this all in the help file on buffers. We didn't really touch on this, so if you have done this, it's very good of you. Split window, we've done it. We use vsplit or just regular split. That's it. These are the exercises. If you've done them all by yourself, congratulations. It's very good, especially since we have done some things that we didn't really cover. But I have shown a lot of them. Yeah, if you stick around to the next lectures, I will show you what you can do if you continue learning with Vim, or what your next steps could be. Thank you for watching, and have a good day. Welcome to an extra lecture on macros. A macro is a reusable series of key presses, and it's one of the most powerful ways to use Vim. But beginners often find it really daunting or scary to start using them. But they don't have to be difficult. A macro can be recorded using the Q key, followed by a register in which to save it. In short, a register is a place where Vim stores certain things such as copied text, macros, and marks. Oftentimes I record a macro in the Q register, so I just press QQ to record a macro in the Q register. You can replay a macro with the @ sign, followed by the register. So in my case, oftentimes it's @Q. You can also add a number before the @ sign to play a macro a set number of times. Let's see it in action. I have my Vim open with some words here, and I can record a macro. So let's press QQ to record a macro in the Q register. You can see in the bottom left corner that it says recording @Q. And let's, for some reason, change the first word of each of these sentences. So what I can do, for some reason, I can mess something up. Like, oh no, I was at the second word, but I wanted to do the first word, so I messed up. Let's press U to undo that change. We're still recording the macro. And let's go to the first non-whitespace character using the caret key. Now we are still recording the register even with our small mistake. We undid the change, so it doesn't really matter. And we are at the first non-whitespace character. Let's record our real macro right now. So let's do CE to cut the until the end of the word. Let's type first for some reason. Escape to go back into normal mode, and press J to go into one line below. And let's press the caret key again to make sure we're at the first non-whitespace character again. Then to stop recording, we press Q again. And if I type :register, you can see right here down below in the Q register we have our macro. And it looks really weird, especially with the escape characters, but these are the key presses that we have recorded. So let's press enter to close that, and let's press @Q. And as you can see, the first word changes, even though it has more characters than the other word, which is where the power of Vim motions come in handy with macros. So let's do @Q, @Q, @Q. It's that easy. So it's not really, it doesn't have to be that hard. We can also do more complex macros, which might take a while to set up. So for example, we have an unordered list, delta, whatever, right? It doesn't really matter. But we want to make it an ordered list. For this, we have some very interesting key combinations that we can use. What I'm thinking is we have to set a number manually at first, and then we have to copy that number and somehow increment it. Well, what do you know? There is a key combination that we can use to increment a number. It doesn't show up right here in the help right now, but I will show you. The key combination is Control A, and if I have a number 1 right here, and I press Control A, you can see that it increments, which is, in my opinion, a pretty sick key combination to know. So our step-for-step plan for creating this macro is 1. We have to manually set the first character, the first number, so that we can create a macro that we can continually run. Next, we need to copy that number. We need to paste that where the dash is and go to next line, of course. So let's first change the first character with 1. So we go to the first character, the first column, and we press R to replace a character 1. Let's record our macro, or at least let's try to. I might not get it in first try. So we're recording at macro at register Q. We YE, so we yank until the first other word, until the end of the word that we're currently on. We go down 1, we do V, and then P. That didn't work, so let's quickly reset and record a new macro in Q. So if we do VE, we can see that it will, for some reason, go into the end of the other word, which is something that we don't want. So let's do VW and then 1 back with H. We yank that, we go down 1, we press the caret key to make sure that we're on the first character. We highlight that and we paste it. Then we press X to go back 1 character, since we had that extra space selected, which of course you don't have to. You could also fix that when highlighting. Then let's go back 1 character with H again. Press R, Control A. And then let's stop recording. So if I do at Q, look at that. And if I do 2 at Q, it will repeat it 2 more times. Let's see that again in action, because honestly it's so sick. 4 at Q, boom. I kind of messed up because it starts where your cursor is, so I had it at 1. So if I do this, then make sure that this is 2, and we do 4 at Q, it will start at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one is pretty horrible to set up, and let's take a look. It looks like a mess, but it's just something to keep in mind that when you get comfortable using these macros and comfortable using Vim, things like this will just flow out of your brain. And you can blow the minds of your coworkers or people on YouTube. So, in summary, macros are awesome. They're simple to understand, they're simple to record and to play back. But you can make them as big as you want. There are some YouTubers that do advent of code with macros. Of course, we have the Primogen on YouTube, who is pretty well known in the Vim community as a whole, but he has some pretty sick macros as well. And even if you decide to use them, even if it's just one time a month, once it works and it clicks, you'll feel amazing every time it works. Thank you so much for watching this extra lecture, and have a great day. Hi, and welcome to this lecture on marks. Marks in Vim are a powerful feature that make it easy to move around files to predetermined locations. There are a few ways to use marks, and we will cover them here in this short lecture. You can think of marks like bookmarks, but for cursor positions. They help us jump back and forth through files. To make a mark, use the letter M with a number, for example, or a character. For example, MA will set a mark to the A register. Uppercase registers will be global and will move through files. Let's check this out. I have two files open here. Let's just say something, please. Let's yoink it. Let's save it. Go to the next register and make it say 2. Alright. If I want to set a mark on the S from something, I just type M followed by the letter A. If I type marks, I can see, oops, I should be able to see mark A right here on a say something. I have my cursor down here right now. If I type a backtick followed by lowercase a, it will go to that file. But if I am on the other buffer and I do backtick lowercase a, it says mark not set because it's a local register. It also doesn't show it right here. But if I do M uppercase A right here on please, and I go to marks, we can see it right here. And if I go to the next buffer, I can do backtick uppercase A, and we go back to the first buffer. That is what it means if a register has a global mark or not a global mark. We can jump through marks with a backtick or a single quote. I see I've messed up my presentation here a little bit because I wanted to escape a backtick. But a single quote works as well. I've just shown how it works with a backtick, but just with a single quote it works as well. Mark not set, that's correct because I typed the lowercase mark. But if I go to, whoops, that's right, and go to the other file, I can do single quote A to go to say something, or single quote uppercase A to go back to the other file. There are also a few built-in marks that that update constantly, like your last jump, for example, through a search. We can do a double single quote, so single quote to go to the last jump. The last file exit, I probably don't have one right now. I guess it's at please. The last change, which is down here, I guess I added a line. And last insert mode, which will probably be here as well. No, it's down 1. But you get the point. There are a few marks built in already. And as I've shown, we can view all the marks that we have using the marks command. It looks like a mess. Up here we had the marks that we used. We have my presentation. We have a few others. Some marks that are older and from other projects, etc. But it will show all your marks. If you want to learn more, you can always go through the help command for marks. Thank you for watching. Hi, in this lecture we will be talking about folds in Vim. Folds let us collapse or hide parts of a file. This is great for helping us quickly scan the contents of a file without checking what's in every function. For example, you have a controller with a ton of endpoints. You may only want to see the function names, since you don't really care about what's in the function unless you have encountered the right one, the one that you are searching for. Then you would fold all functions so that you can scan the file quickly. Folds work with motions. The basic command to create a new fold is zf followed by a motion, for example 3j. So zf 3j will create a fold of the next 3 lines of code. If I go into here and I do zf 3j, you can kind of see my theme is not the best. Let's change to another one. Industry has a great contrast. You can see that we have a fold of 4 lines, starting with pub function init, which is correct. We can open the fold with zo, and we can close an existing fold with zc. For example, if I go to this struct, I can do zc, and it will say no fold found. If I go 8 lines down on the init function and I do zc, it will create the same fold again. We can also toggle using za. So za will open it and za will close it. But we now have this one fold. But how do we know that it exists if it is open? For this we can use the fold column. You can set fold column to 1 or whatever width you want, but 1 is enough. And right here you can see these lines. These signify an open fold. If I close the fold, it will simply have a plus. If we set it to a larger number, it doesn't really change anything. It's just styling. So 1 is enough. We can also set a fold method. A fold method, for example, can be on indentation or on syntax if we have the proper syntax support, which in some Vim distributions or NeoVim is a lot easier to do. For now, we'll just stick to indentation and the manual mode, which is what we are using at the moment. If we set the fold method to indent for indentation, it will create a ton of folds for us. At least that's what it should, or at least that's what it did if you check the fold column right here. We can close them all using Z capital M, and then you can see we can very quickly scan this file. We can see, oh, everything in here is an import from the standard library, cross term. Here we have some functions in it, restore, and it all created the folds on the indentation. If we open this specific fold, we can open it with just L in this case. Sometimes you can also open it with J if you step into it or go below it. but that really depends on your configuration. We can see that it has also created folds for all the nested methods. Let's try and see if the fold column does anything right here. It does. So my previous statement was wrong. If you have multiple nested folds, the fold column width will actually matter. So sorry for that. If I open this, we can see there is a ton that's happened here. Our fold column is like all kinds of whack right now. But if we want to close them all, we can just do ZM. And let's go up a bit. You can see that it has closed all the folds. And we can pretty quickly scan the whole file. Here we still have a summary. To create a basic fold, it's just ZF with a motion in manual mode especially. You can use ZO and ZC to open and close existing folds. You can use the fold column to show all the existing folds, which is useful for what we've just seen. We can toggle with ZA. We can create a lot of folds automatically using the fold method. And we can use the capital M and capital R to open and close all the folds at once. ZR and ZM. Alright, that's it. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Hi, and welcome to this short lecture, I hope, on Xmode and the command line history. If you've ever picked up a book on Vim, you might have seen something like Xmode or Xcommands, which I have my little book of Vim, the VI and Vim editors pocket reference right here in front of me, and I have a chapter on Xcommands. This section summarizes the Xcommands used from the colon print in VI. So Xcommands are pretty much just a set of commands that you can run from the command line of Vim. So we have Vim, and the command line down here, like down here, is just where you could run Xcommands. So what is it? It's like kind of a relic from the past. If I go back to my terminal here and I write X, we can see that we have something like entering X mode, type visual to go to normal mode. This is where you would do some things on a file, such as search and replace, and you can see the familiar colon right here, right? And we can just do Q, enter to quit. So because VI, the editor before Vim, is based on the editor called X, we still have this relic from the past. And within Vim, we can actually enter this using a capital Q. So you might have seen this if you have worked in Vim a lot and you make a typo, like you forget that you're holding shift, or maybe you have your caps lock on and you see this, and then, well, you can just type visual to go back, or Q to quit, because it's just a Vim-like command, but from the older X editor. But I don't think I've ever seen anyone use it, even Primogen or like other Twitch streamers. No, I don't think I have seen it. But something that you might have seen someone use is the command line history window. So this again is a very common typo, and I've done this a lot, and I was always freaking out, like, what's this? So instead of colon Q to quit, we just do Q colon, and then we can see this unnamed buffer, and you can see some commands here. You can see that I was working on some other lectures and you can see a lot of the things that we have done. You can use like all the Vim motions, like Control D, Control U, to just scroll between all the commands that you have used. And if I press enter, it will run this command. So for example, let's just type something here: ASD, ASD, DSA, ASD, and GG, VG, and we say I want to I want to search and replace the DSA and make it ASD, and let's just do it globally, like, I don't know, and we do enter, and okay, so now we don't really have anything, so this is great. But what if this this file gets, I don't know, corrupted again in this sense? Then we can just do Q colon and go up and run it again, which is a bit quicker than rewriting the whole search and replace again. So for things like that, the command line history window is pretty awesome. But I am not really in the habit of using it that often, so I just need to remind myself that it exists and that it's very useful. So just to recap very quickly, we have covered what X is, the editor on which VI is based. We have seen how to enter it in Vim itself, visual, and we have seen our command line, visual, our command line window with Q colon. Thank you for watching. Hi, and welcome to a very quick lecture on Netrw, officially called Network Read Write, which is what it stands for. But basically, it's a file explorer in Vim. And you might have encountered it already if you've ever opened Vim with like a folder instead of a file as argument. So if I do vim dot, which is of course the current directory that we're in, so in this case courses Vim course chapter 4, then this will be opened, and it looks a bit chaotic, like especially these things at the top. I really don't ever pay attention to what is here. You can see the full path sorted by name, etc. Some help commands. Down here is where it is interesting. These are all the files that are in the current folder, and with J and K we can just move around here, and with enter we can enter another directory if we need to, or we can go back a directory, or we can go forward again, right? And if I press enter on a file, it will open that file right in Vim. So that's pretty cool, right? It's very useful, but it gets even more useful later on when we will talk about buffers and editing multiple files in a single Vim instance. Because with Netrw, we can do the X command, which stands for Explorer, I think. Of course, it's help colon X. It's just X. And it's the same as edit. And if we go to edit, we can see that it's the colon E that we've used before, right? So this will just open a new file. Like we've done things like this before, like edit a file. Colon BD, by the way, is buffer delete. More on that later. But we can do X and then, or even edit, and we can give it a folder. So again, let's do the dot, which is easy, and it will open Netrw. Vim opens this in a new buffer. So if we want to close this window, we don't need want to use :Q because it will quit Vim. So if I do this, I want to close it with buffer delete, and then it will go back to here, right? But if I try to edit or open a folder, it will complain if I didn't write the file. So pretty cool stuff. And just to recap a bit, I don't use Netrw very often, mostly because I use Vim with a file tree plugin. So it's a bit more like a regular IDE. But if you're using plain vanilla Vim on a remote server, for example, this is really useful. So you don't have to quit Vim and ls all the way to where you need to be, right? You can just look around a bit. It's great. Thank you for watching. Hi, and welcome to this new section on buffers, tabs, and windows in Vim, which are the building blocks for multitasking and very pretty screenshots that you might see on Reddit. Let's start with a quick overview. So we have three things in Vim which are kind of related to each other. We have buffers, which are pretty much just files that are open in memory, so files that you have opened in Vim. We have windows, which is basically a viewport of a buffer, so a single window has a single buffer. And we have tabs, which aren't really tabs in the conventional sense. A lot of plugin creators just abuse buffers to recreate some tab functionality. But you also always open a single tab. So when you start Vim, let's just start Vim, we have a single buffer, which we can list with :ls, with a single window, which is just the viewport of this buffer, which is in a single workspace, which is what I like to call tabs, because you should see them as workspaces. So when we then continue, we can say, okay, :E, so open a file, test1.md. If I list the buffers again with :ls, or you could also write :buffers, which is the same. ls is just a short alias. We can see that it had overwritten that no name buffer, which is fine because, well, it was a no name buffer without any content, so we don't really care. But if we do test2.md as well, we can see that right now we are in test2. Let's just write the file. And if I do ls right now, we can see that even though the buffer was empty, we still have our test1.md. So when I do this, you can see we have some pretty signs. We have at the bottom here, we have our numbers of the tabs, or the buffer numbers. And we have some symbols, a hashtag and a %a. You can view all the symbols if you just do help :buffers or :ls, and then scroll down a bit. We have the indicators right here. We can see that A is indeed the active buffer. And % is any buffer in the current window. We can also see that a plus is a modified buffer, and X with some errors. Okay, fine. So how do you actually use these buffers? Because we don't really, I see that I messed up my slides there a bit, but it doesn't matter. We can now just see a single buffer, and we don't want to do test1.md again and again and again. Let's just also say test1. Like, okay, test 2.md, right? And then again, no, we just want to switch to the buffers. We can, if we want, let's just open a test tree file as well. And let's just say test tree, let's write it. Now we can see we have 3 buffers, okay? So fine, cool. We can cycle through the buffers with b next, which will go to the next buffer. If you can see right here, we have 1, 2, 3, and then it should loop back around to 3, or back to 1 from 3. So let's do b next, and we should go to 2. And we do. That's nice. We also have b prev to go to the previous buffer, which is pretty fine. It's nice. I like it this way. But let's just quickly do the help of the b next. We can see that at start here, we just have this bn, and then the ext, like it looks kind of optional, right? We also have a number, which you could add if you want. So you can go like 2 buffers next or 2 buffers previous, which we will see as well. But we can also just use bn, and the same with bprev, we can just use bp. And if we do 2 bn, we immediately go to 3. But let's say you have like 12 buffers open. I mean, if you've coded in a big project, you know that you're probably working in like a ton of files at the same time, or maybe you just forgot to close them. Then we can just list the buffers, try to remember the number. I can see here that we have 2 and a 4, because I guess I had closed the 3rd buffer, which is fine. But then we can just do buffer, let's say 1, or buffer 3, which doesn't exist, which I forgot. And then you get weird behavior. So let's just do test 1. Let's just see if this works. I guess it does. I guess it doesn't. So let's just do test 1. Okay, so that's all really cool. We now know how to list buffers, how to move around between buffers. We know that we can just use the buffer number to get to a specific number or a specific buffer. So the last thing that we need to know is how to remove a buffer, because you want to close your tabs, right? For that we can just use b or buff delete. I guess it's b delete. I made a typo. So b delete, and then the buffer is gone. If I do help b delete, we can see again that we have this shortcut, which is just bd. So you should keep that in mind if you can, because it's just a lot quicker to do it that way. A lot of like Vim distributions, or if you use a buffer bar plugin, you often have a few key maps, which would be Shift H or Shift L, which will go to the next or previous buffer, which is, I love it a lot. It's great. So yeah, you can do that if you want. But buffers like this, they're like kind of hard to work with. You need to list them, and you know, without a buffer bar plugin, it's just like not that useful, I'd say, for working a bit big projects. So in the next lecture, we will see how to make this a bit better. Hi, and welcome to this next lecture where we will actually be making our buffers more useful. So what is a window? Again, I've mentioned this in the last lecture. A window is just a viewport of a single buffer. And as you might remember, a single tab, or workspace as I like to call it, can have multiple windows, and a window could have multiple buffers. in some way. So let's just get started by opening our test files. So, whoops, test1.md, test2.md, and test3.md. So right now we have 3 buffers open, but we only have a single window. So let's just do split, just :split. And this might seem a little bit familiar to you because we have, of course, worked with the help functionality, which essentially just opens the help text in a buffer and it opens that in a split window. So it's very similar. But if we want, we can also do vsplit, which will create a vertical split, which is of course very useful if you have a wide monitor. So with this, how do we actually kind of work a bit more with this? Because we can see test 3 times here, and we don't really know how to move around, or I might have mentioned it, but just to recap or reiterate, we can do Control W, which is just basically for each window functionality, the prefix, like kind of, and then we can just use the H, J, K, and L keys to move around. So with Control W, L, we can move to the right. With Control W, J, we move to the window below. K, we go back up again, and so on. We also have a Control W, W. So you can just hold Control and just spam W to cycle through your windows, right? So let's close a few of these windows just for now. If I do vsplit in the help, if I can type, we can again see that we have the short alias version. So we can just use vs, and if I do help split, we can see that sp will create a horizontal split for us. So let's just create another split for now, and let's just list the buffers. We can see that we have 3 buffers open, but only the test3 has the A flag, which means that it's active. So let's just do bn on our topmost window, and let's do ls again, and then we can see we have 2 buffers open, and one of which, or they're both active, but one of which is actually the one where we have the focus, which is test1, which is the %, I think. So you can see that in this way that the buffers, like having multiple buffers, can get a bit more interesting. If we really want to, you can just work with the same file in 2 buffers. This might be useful if you're editing some code like at the top of a file and you want to check what's at the bottom of the same file, because maybe you are rewriting a function, or you're just using another functionality that you don't have really documented anywhere, so you need to check the code of that. Something like that, right? So this makes buffers a lot more interesting. Let's do just another vsplit. Let's go into that again and just like bn. So now we have 1, 2, and 3, which is great. You might want to be able to save all the files at once. We can just use WA, write all, because you can move around if you have like these these windows open. I keep pressing F1. You can move around with these windows open even when you don't save them. So if you want to quit, then you get errors, like you might want to do WA, or just quit Vim altogether and quit all the windows at once with QA. So that's it for this lecture. It was a bit of a quicker one. Functionality like this gets a whole lot more interesting if you actually start using buffer line plugins, or just create your own, which is also very cool and pretty easy. So yeah, for now, I will skip the tabs because they don't really get used a lot. If I open Vim and I just do VS and split, like this whole thing is a single workspace. If I would do tab new, you can see that I have a new tab open with just a single split. And I think it's tab previous to go to the previous one. And it looks cool, like this, you know, with actual tab looking things. But a lot of plugin creators just abuse the buffer system and the buffer list to create this tab-like functionality. So keep that in mind. I might do a lecture on tabs later on, but not for now. But you know, you never know. I keep updating this course as I go along and learn new things. So maybe someday. Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Hi everyone, and welcome to this lecture on NeoVim, or should I say this chapter on NeoVim. NeoVim, what it is, we will get into that in the next slide. But for now, let's first check how to install NeoVim. NeoVim can be installed in a few ways. You can build it from scratch, which, I mean, if you want cutting edge features, then you should probably do that. But otherwise, you can install it via Snap if you are running Ubuntu or something similar. I don't really recommend it since it's often a bit outdated. You can use a app image if you like that, but you can also install it with your distributions package manager, such as Pacman if you're running Arch, or apt-get if you're running Ubuntu. You should check the official docs because there's a whole list of ways you can install it. Of course, you could also use Nix if you would really like, but yeah, why should you? I mean, if you're running Nix, okay, sure. So why and what? NeoVim is a Vim fork. That means it's really based on the original Vim, but it tries to improve Vim in a few different ways. The most notable is the Lua-based scripting. Lua is a scripting language. It's very easy to learn. It's a bit weird in some ways, but not really weird in the same sense that VimScript is weird, which is why NeoVim has a beautiful plugin ecosystem, and there are a ton of open source developers that create beautiful plugins. NeoVim also provides some better APIs to actually customize the editor, but we will see that in a moment as well. It tries to retain the character of Vim, so the plugin ecosystem, ease of use, quick startup, things like that. It doesn't try to be a full-blown IDE out of the box. So let's take a quick look at NeoVim, right? I have my whole setup, so I'm using --clean to run a NeoVim instance that doesn't use my configuration files. So it looks like this. It's pretty familiar, right? If I run Vim, you should see something that looks a lot like our NeoVim. It has a different theme, but you know, that's not really interesting. It still has the same command line at the bottom. We still have the insert mode. Like it's not really that different from regular Vim, right? We can still say set relative line, set relative number is, I think, yeah, relative number, and then we can still get the relative line numbers, right? So it's not really that different, unless, of course, you run it with a bunch of plugins in a full project, for example. This is just a hobby Rust project. Don't look at the code, it's pretty horrible. Yeah, you can see I'm starting up Vim and I see this pixel art of a motorcycle because it's cool. I see this menu, which is a plugin. I like it. Then we can just do F to find a file, and right here you can see the a showcase of the file that you're hovering over, and then I just type enter. We can see that NeoVim is using external software like Rust Analyzer to provide some IDE-like functionality. For example, I can hover over this option and I can see some documentation. I can go into the actual file where option is defined, things like that. I also have this buffer bar at the top, like these tabs. So yeah, it can provide a bunch of functionality, but when you start out with a clean NeoVim, it doesn't have all those things. And if I ever get into plugins, then you might start to see how that works. My NeoVim configuration is also pretty big. I have this config here, right, in the menu, and here you can see it's a lot. Okay, that's my my dot files, like right here, right? It's a lot. Like these log files and lazyvim.json. It's a lot, like a lot of files, and these are just my custom settings. I am using lazyvim, which is a distribution of NeoVim that uses the lazy plugin manager. But again, that's just NeoVim with a lot of plugins. This is not a NeoVim course, so besides this chapter, I will not really be talking about NeoVim, and I will be focusing on regular Vim. Your Vim skills can easily translate to NeoVim, except for, of course, the configuration. And it all comes down to preference. Regular Vim is installed in so many systems by default that it's just great to know your way around the original Vim. And if you have a developer setup for yourself and you know that those files don't just disappear, you can, of course, install NeoVim, add some plugins, etc. Hi, and welcome on this lecture on NeoVim configuration, which is done in Lua, which is way more lovely than VimScript is. So for this lecture, what are we translating to Lua? Well, let's just use our vimrc that we were using before in the Vim lectures, which is a great starting point, of course. So we set the leader key to space because it's way better. We set the line numbers relative, of course. We add some indentation options. Like, we can do all of these. I might just explain how to do it because it's a lot of typing and it's pretty much the same, but I will show you a bit anyway. Okay, so in this folder I have a init.lua. I also have an init-lua, which was a mistake. So I have an init.lua, which is the name of your configuration file. My configuration file is in my home.config/NeoVim, right? Right here you can see I have my init.lua, which is the starting point. And mine is not very big because I'm using LazyVim, again, which is a configuration, a pre-made NeoVim configuration, which is just great. I have some other configurations that you saw in the last lecture, but it's not really that big of a deal. But because I have this init.lua, I will be using the -u flag, which, if it is listed here, will use another configuration file. So chapter 6, this is, oops, okay, cool. And I didn't know that ld was a command. Alright, so I have my init.lua right here, and I will be using it with the -u flag. But if you have your init.lua in your home/.config/nvim, then you don't have to use the u flag, which is this in a nutshell, right? So init.lua, and let's open init.lua as well. So we don't really have anything here, right? We have opened a buffer with init.lua, but we don't have anything. So we can start out by adding the map leader. The map leader is found in the global as a global variable. So how do I set it? Like right here, it has the Vim script method, but not the NeoVim method of adding this to your configuration. And I know that global configurations are done with vim.g, which is from these Lua-like docs. You can see that it's global editor variables. So then I can just use vim.g.mapLeader is a space, right? But for the line numbers, it's a bit different. Those are not the global variables. We don't set them with the let keyword like we did in our vimrc, right? Like we don't use let, but we use set. So these are done with vim.opt. And then we have the same names. So number, which is true, and relative number, which is also true. If you want to enable them temporarily, you can still use set relative number, just like in regular Vim, and set number. Great. But if I write and quit and I open this again, we can see that this persists. And because I'm using the -u flag, I'm using this configuration instead of my own. So I will not go over all the other all these, because again, like these are again with set, and instead of is true, you say is 4, which is just a number in Lua. These again, vim.opt, because we are using the set keyword. This I can show, but it's just a string, right? So it's vim.opt.clipboard equals unnamed plus, right? But what I will show you, is these two, because these have a little bit more weird syntax, right? Syntax on, we don't see that anywhere here. File type plugin and indent on. It's a bit weird. So there are many ways to do the same configuration in NeoVim. So you always have some sort of vim dot whatever option. But if you don't want to search for it, or you just know how it is done in VimScript, you can use vim.cmd. And then this is an error that I get for some reason, probably because it loads something of my previous configuration. So please ignore it. With vim.cmd, you can run VimScript syntax. So if I do help vim.cmd and ignore the error again, then we can see it executes VimScript. So we can use vim.cmd and then file type, plugin, indent on, and we have the same configuration, right? So this is just a very little showcase of how to use Lua for the basic configurations that we already did in our vimrc, right? NeoVim has a ton, and I mean an absolute ton of possible options. And as you have seen, like, you can create side sheets, you can create a CMD line which just hovers instead of down here, right? You can add a menu which will be the first buffer that you enter. So there's a lot that you can do, but it all relies on plugins, and of course you can write your own, which is fun, but it's difficult to get started with. ChatGPT is a great help for that though. So in conclusion, in my opinion, NeoVim is awesome, and it gets even better with plugins. But you just need to know that it doesn't fully replace Vim, not in every sense. If you're a sysadmin that works on remote machines a lot, you don't want to install NeoVim on all of them. So that's why Vim is still great to learn, even though NeoVim is such a big thing right now. Thank you. Congratulations. Your Vim mastery starts now. And if you try to use Vim often, you will see that it'll become second nature quite easily. If you want to continue your terminal productivity mastery, here are some topics that you might want to learn next. You could learn Tmux, which is the terminal multiplexer that I have been using this whole lecture, or this whole course. It's great for productivity and reduces context switching some more. I use it with multiple panes often for my server and client processes. And I often use another window for my NeoVim. Another tool I use, of course, is NeoVim instead of regular Vim, which is a modern Vim successor. And if you want to have a full-fledged NeoVim IDE experience, I can personally recommend LazyVim. There are a lot of distributions out there, such as LazyVim, but for me, LazyVim was just the best one. You also have Astro NeoVim, NVChad, and some others. It has a lot of plugins installed already. The configuration is pretty easy. It's just an amazing tool, and it's so much better than using a Vim plugin in an existing IDE such as VS Code or any of the JetBrains IDEs. Although the Vim plugins do make life a lot better. If you're curious, I have recorded this whole course within the terminal, within Tmux, and I've done the presentations with a terminal-based slideshow application called Slides. So if I open my presentation.md, you can see that we have all the slides in here. And this is great because I can create it in Markdown. I thought it fit the course pretty great. So it's been a lot of fun to use. It's my first time. And I've also used Tmux to keep Vim on the side as well. The screen should be pretty familiar to you right now. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Thank you so much for following the course. And please let me know if there's anything that I should re-record, get deeper into in some lectures, or what I could do to make a follow-up course. Again, thank you very much, and have a wonderful day. Good luck on your Vim journey.